All right, so welcome to SeadragonSearch for new participants. Our goals today are to cover a bit of background on the project and how to get involved in reporting Sea Dragon encounters to our platform. So I'm going to go ahead and share a brief presentation with you all just to give you a little bit more background about what it is that we're trying to accomplish with SeadragonSearch. So again, I'm Chrissy Testison. My supervisor, who's also here today, supervising my PhD, is Dr. Nerida Wilson. Dr. Greg Rouse is another of my supervisors who's has expertise in sea dragons. He's at sea right now, so couldn't be here today. But yeah, Nerida and I will be here to answer any questions that y'all have at the end. So let's go ahead and start by just talking about the species that SeadragonSearch is focused on, because there are actually 3 known species of sea dragons, but we focus on 2 of them. And the ones we focus on are common or weedy sea dragons that you can see there on the left, and leafy sea dragons on the right. These are the species that we know live within recreational scuba diving depths and even snorkeling or free diving depths. And in addition to being so visually stunning and spectacular, as you can see in these photos, they are also quite special in that they are only found in Australia. They are part of the same fish family as seahorses and pipefishes, and like some of those relatives, they can be considered what we call a flagship species, which in conservation terms means just an especially charismatic animal that is popular with the public. And animals like this can encourage better conservation behaviors that benefit themselves and also the many other creatures that they share habitat with. So sea dragons are great for bringing attention to ocean conservation, and also they are simply one of the coolest fishes ever, and they make people happy. The challenge with them is that we still don't know a lot about them because they can be difficult to find and to study. And we have some reasons to be concerned about their well-being, which I'll elaborate on in just a bit. So there are organizations out there like this one called the International Union for the Conservation of Nature that try to help protect all kinds of species with assessments that tell us whether they seem to be threatened or vulnerable to extinction. And the IUC Red List is one of these assessments where species can be categorized according to different levels of vulnerability or resilience. And on the IUCN Red List currently, both weedy and leafy sea dragons are listed as least concern, which is partly due to a lack of data about them. We're not so sure that this is the category they truly belong in. Sea dragons have actually bounced around between different categories on the Red List over the years as scientists have been trying to figure out where they really belong. And the researchers who have studied sea dragons up to this point have expressed concerns about their status, as well as the need for further study. So the current Red List assessment for weedy sea dragons acknowledges that they are vulnerable to human impacts, but it focuses on more localized thinking, assuming that if a lot of sea dragon range occurs away from big cities, they are less likely to be seriously threatened by human impacts. But actually, we know that climate change is a human impact that threatens species at the ecosystem level. So we're concerned about this in addition to the pollution and habitat loss that's happening near cities. And sea dragons are amazing in many ways, but they are not great swimmers. And we know that individual sea dragons don't move very far from small home ranges. So if their habitats change, they can't necessarily just go somewhere else. The Red List assessment for leafy sea dragons gives similar reasoning for the least concern classification, but both assessments also mention the lack of data on components that would help us to better understand how these fish are threatened. And those data include things like abundance estimates, how population numbers might change over time, and understanding how populations exposed to different ocean conditions might be different from one another. We also know from genetic studies that some sea dragon populations don't have a lot of genetic diversity, and that can also make them less resilient to challenges in their environments. So the goal of SeadragonSearch is to do widespread and long-term monitoring for both weedy and leafy sea dragons so that we can begin to fill in some of those gaps in the data and assess conservation status for both species with more precision. We will be looking at abundance estimates for populations in each Australian state where sea dragons live, and also how those numbers might change over time. We also want to learn more about how long sea dragons live in different places and what their reproductive habits are like. And since we've begun this project, we've realized that we can also learn about parasites in sea dragons because we can see parasites in the photos that we collect as data and document the locations where they're occurring and how many and things like that. Also on the topic of parasites, since we may have some divers and snorkelers in the audience today, sometimes when we're diving with sea dragons and we see parasites on them, there can be an instinct or a temptation to pull them off of the sea dragons, but we'd actually discourage you doing that and say just leave them as they are, partly because we still don't know a lot about them. Also because parasites actually are a natural thing and they usually don't want to kill their host. So sometimes pulling them off might actually cause more damage than just leaving them to complete their natural cycle. So the bottom line is to be on the safe side and just avoid touching sea dragons for any reason. All right, so back to the project. To get this project off the ground, we've been able to collaborate with other sea dragon researchers in various parts of Australia, which has been awesome, as well as software developers at the nonprofit organization WildMe, who helped us to create the tools that we needed to start tracking sea dragons in the wild, start collecting more data about them, and getting the data that we need to make plans for protecting them. The platform that WildMe developed with us is called a Wild Book, and it's essentially a collection of machine learning tools that analyzes photos of animals with unique markings. So using these kinds of tools, we're able to match new photos to other photos of the same animal. And WildMe has developed wild books for many different species to gather data that would otherwise potentially be too time or effort intensive to collect and analyze. Both weedy and leafy sea dragons have unique patterns on their bodies and their faces. So with WildMe, we were able to train an algorithm to detect individual dragons in photos and try to tell them apart from one another. So a quick overview of the way this works. There's a lot more that has gone into it than this slide is gonna show, but just to give the basics, once a photo is submitted to the database, this machine learning pipeline begins. And the first thing that happens is to distinguish the fish from the background by creating these bounding boxes around the body and the head. Then the computer looks at what we call visual texture on the fish's body and face, and it looks for similarities to other photos of other sea dragons that are already in the database. Then it's going to rank possible matches based on how much similarity it finds between those photos. And then it returns to us a list of suggested matches, and we can look at those and we can decide whether there is a true match. So this is where Nerida and I come in, and we look through all of these possible matches and we make decisions about how to assign an individual ID number to a new photo. If there is indeed a match from that list of suggested matches with an individual already in the database, then we'll assign the new photo to that existing ID number. And if there are no matches, we'll assign a new ID to that animal and we'll begin a new time series for her or him. That's the simplified version of how it works. We often run into tricky matches and have various strategies that we use in different situations, but overall, the algorithm works incredibly well and is usually accurate with its suggestions. So the overall goal is to build out time series for each individual sea dragon in the database. And this is one example of one of our oldest and most beloved weedy sea dragons from Tasmania. His nickname is Speedy in the database, and we have many encounters of him spanning many years, thanks to one of our regular contributing photographers. And SeadragonSearch just launched officially about a year ago in October of 2020. But the neat thing about photos is that we can travel back in time. So with this time series, for example, we can see when Speedy has carried eggs over the years. We can see how many broods he's had, because male sea dragons carry the eggs, for anyone who's not familiar with that unique characteristic of sea dragons. Or we can see when Speedy has suffered injuries. And so we can start to build out the story of his life with all of these photos and observations. And also keep in mind that for the site where Speedy lives in Tasmania, I have some statistics there at the bottom showing that we currently have 187 individual Weedies from this particular site, with over 1,500 encounters amongst them. So we can eventually use these data on individuals to generate abundance estimates and reproductive timelines and other data that can inform better conservation planning. And just to give a sense of where we're at overall, we currently have over 5,200 encounters Australia-wide, with over 2,200 individuals identified for both species, which has really surpassed our expectations for our first year of public engagement, and is completely thanks to all of the volunteers and underwater photographers who have shared photos with us and helped us to build this database. So on that note, I'd like to invite any of you who photograph sea dragons and have not yet worked with SeadragonSearch to come join us and share those photos with our platform. And along those lines, I'm going to talk more specifically now about how to do that by going through the steps of showing you an example of how to submit photos and submit an encounter to our database. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out my screen share. There we go. And okay, and I'm going to share with you again. And we're going to take a look at some photos. And I'm just going to walk you through my thinking process of how I would choose my photos first of all, because that's really the first step. You don't need to submit all of your photos to the platform. That might be a misconception. We actually just need one or two of your best photos to be able to identify a sea dragon. So the most important thing to keep in mind, or the most important things to keep in mind, are that you need to know the date and location of the photos that you took. And you can, ideally choose photos that have the best resolution and viewpoint to be able to see the patterning on the sea dragon's face and body. So these photos that I have here are from a dive I did on September 10th, 2019. And I can confirm the date and location from my dive log, as well as the metadata attached to my photos. And all I need for my submission, like I mentioned, really is two photos, the best right and the best left side shot. And I happen to know that all of these photos are of the same sea dragon because I organized them into a folder right after my dive. But if you ever aren't sure whether your photos are of the same dragon, you can just submit them as separate encounters, and you don't need to include both right and left sides in the same submission. You can do them separately if you're not sure. So I'm going to scroll through these and look for the best right and left views. I'm just going to move my Zoom window here so I can see them. So this first one I'm on, this is a pretty good photo, and I'm gonna just zoom in on it a bit. It might take a minute to catch up resolution-wise, depending on your internet speed, but what I'm looking at right here is a really nice clear shot of the side view of the right side of the Weedy's face. And I can distinguish the spot patterns with my own eyes, which if I can see it, that means that the computer vision model is going to be able to see it as well. So that's kind of a good little test to do to see if your photos are going to work. This one's pretty good. If I look at the other right side shots that I have of this dragon, this one's a little further away. There's also some sediment in the water, that we were dealing with on this day. So I think that this one is going to be the winner for the right side. And when I look at my left side ones, this one, again, I mean, this could work if this was the best photo that I had, but it's not quite, the patterning is not quite as distinctive as in the photo that I just looked at for the right side. So if I have a better one, in this one, he's kind of turned away, he or she is kind of turned away from me. But in this one, this looks like a nice clear view. And when we zoom in, that looks pretty good. I can clearly see the patterning on the face. It's also a clear view of the body because sometimes we use that for matching as well. So I am going to go with, I think, this one and the right side one that I chose for my right and left. And another thing to note is that these are not amazing portrait perfect photos, and they don't need to be. For the algorithm to work, we just need that clear side view of the sea dragon. So just consider factors like resolution and water clarity when you're choosing photos to submit. And as far as taking the photos in the first place, we have a code of conduct to advise on that process. And I will show you how to find that in just a bit. But first, we're going to submit these photos. So I am going to navigate to SeadragonSearch.org, which is our main website. And on this page, I can just come to this menu choice that says participate. And if you click right on that word participate, or you can go to submit images, it's going to take you to our reporting form. And this is where you are going to submit your photos along with a little bit of information that is helpful for us to be able to categorize sea dragons in terms of time and place. Also, once you get to this page, don't be distracted by the login that's up there in the right-hand top corner. That's mainly for back-end operations, and you definitely don't need to log in to submit photos. So right now I'm going to demonstrate this without being logged in. And the first thing I'm going to do is drag and drop my chosen photos here. Okay. So I can just drop them right into that gray box, and then I can check and see that the photos I want are there. And just remember that there's some text up here to help remind you of what you should be putting in this gray box. But it's basically one encounter is one sea dragon from one dive. So you'll either have your one best photo of that dragon or the best right and left if you know that it's the same dragon. Or if you're not sure which dragons are which in your photo collection, just submit each photo separately or reach out to us and we can help you. And it is possible actually to submit videos, but we prefer if you can grab still shots from your videos and submit those because we ultimately need a still photo for the detection pipeline. And if you do shoot video with SeadragonSearch in mind, it helps to use settings with higher resolution, as you can check by looking at zooming in on the photos like I just did when I was checking them. And if you need guidance on grabbing stills from video, we can also provide some resources on how to do that. So we try to provide as many supports as possible to help make this process streamlined for you guys. But once the photos are here, we're going to ask for some information about the fish in your photos. Apologies, I keep needing to move my little Zoom box here. So if you were diving or snorkeling with the sea dragon that you photographed, it was probably alive, but sometimes we get photos of beach washed sea dragons as well. So there's an option here to report dead sea dragons, which is sad to see, but does provide data. So if you have photos like that, please feel free to share them. This one was alive, so I'm going to select that. And then next up, we have the species, which is most likely going to be a leafy or a common or a weedy sea dragon. Or if you're not sure, you can select unknown. And there is an option here for the ruby sea dragon, which is the third known species of sea dragon. But rubies typically, as far as we know at this point, live beyond recreational scuba limits. So we're not focused on that species at this point in time, but sometimes they do wash up on the beach. So this option is there to report that if it's needed. And Those beach-washed sea dragons provide distribution records. Even if they've deteriorated too much for pattern matching, the location records are useful. So my sea dragon was a common, so I'm going to go ahead and select that. And next up is the date of your photos, which is one of the most important pieces of information that we ask for. And you can use this calendar tool here to type that in. And I happen to know the exact date of my dive. I know it was September, it was 2019, and it was the 10th. So I'm just going to enter it that way. But if you weren't sure of the exact date, you could give it your best guess and type just the month and year. So you could do this, just September 2019, or even just the year 2019 if you weren't 100%. And we'll follow up with you if we need more information about that. So just do your best. And then the other really important piece of information that we need is the location where your photos were taken. And there are several ways you can report that piece that I'm going to go through. But I just want to let you know first that all of the location data and all of the data on this reporting form is private from the general public. So others won't be able to see the data that you enter here. It's just for those of us working with the data on the back end. So we have a drop-down menu here of some of the more well-known sea dragon dive sites in all of the different Australian states. And so this is the ideal way to report your location if you see the place where you dove in this list, which for me, those particular photos were from Flinders Pier in Victoria. So I'm going to select that one. But if your location is not listed in that drop-down menu, or if you're not sure if it's the right location, or if you just want to add more detail, you can use this blank box here and you can just type right in there anything else that you want to share with us about location. Or you can drop a pin on this map. You can zoom in on it and you can find the spot where you want to show us and just drop a pin there as well. And if you have any further questions about how we handle location data, definitely reach out and chat to us. And I'll let you know how to do that, how to contact us at the end of the talk. While we're in this section, you can also add the depth of your sighting if you know what that depth is. But this information is not critical for us. Location is critical, so definitely make sure to enter location. And then this next section is for contact information. And this is important because we want to have a contact for the owner of the photo in the database and also keep you updated on the status of your sea dragon. So since I'm the one submitting this, I'm going to type in my name and my email. There's another way you can contact me for questions. There's my email right there. And the About You section is for the person who's actually submitting the reporting form. The photographer section is for the person who took the photo, if that person is different from the submitter. In this case, both of them are me. So I'm just gonna put myself here as well. And email. All right, and once you've gotten this far, you're nearly there. Most submitters don't need to worry about affiliation or project, but if there's anything else that you want to tell us about the encounter or the dive or the sea dragon or yourself, that's what the additional comments box is for. So you can leave it blank or leave us notes there if you wish. And then the last section is this expandable advanced information section. And the most helpful bit for you to fill out here is probably the life stage, which is down here. So adult, juvenile, or male with brood, unless you don't know, or the sex, which is up here, male, female, or unknown. And generally the way to tell the sex is whether it has eggs. If it has eggs, it's a male. And if they don't have eggs, it gets pretty tricky to tell the sex. So probably the most obvious situation to report here would be if you saw a juvenile, you could note that. If you know it's an adult, you could note that. Or if it's a male with brood, you could select that. And then also remember, if it's a male with brood, to also select male for the sex. In this case, I don't know what the sex of this dragon is, but I know it's an adult. So I'm just going to select that. And the other fields you don't really need to worry about unless you have something you want to say about behavior or scarring, which you can also report under additional comments. And don't worry too much about the information here if you're not 100%, because Nerida and I check all of this once you receive your submissions. So anything you put is going to be validated by us. And then finally, if there's anyone else who you want to receive updates about your Seadragon, you can add additional email addresses here, then acknowledge that you are not a robot and that you have read our code of conduct. And you can click on this link to view the code of conduct, and I will also show you another way to look at that after I submit this encounter. Okay, so let's go ahead and send the encounter report. Did I miss something? Okay, let me just refresh this page. Oh, maybe it is submitting right now and I'm just, okay, let's leave it alone for a minute and see if it works. And while it is submitting, I want to show you guys the other way that you can view the code of conduct, which is by coming back to our main website at SeadragonSearch.org. And if you navigate again to the participate tab, which is the same one for submitting images, and then go down to code of conduct, that's where you can access that. And this website is our main website. You can access a lot of information here about the project, about Seadragons, but going through everything here is a whole other presentation. So I'm just going to focus on a couple of things for now, like the code of conduct. And this is basically a document outlining how to dive safely and respectfully around Seadragons, and it includes information about different behaviors that might be stressful to Seadragons or to their habitat more broadly, as well as ways to make diving with Seadragons more fun for you as a diver, and fun and safe. So we encourage everyone to read through this code and to revisit it periodically, because these are really, really special fish and habitats, and we don't want to compromise their well-being for any reason. So it's good to be familiar with best practices. Okay, let's see how this is doing. Hey, it's successfully submitted. But before we look at the results of that, I want to just show you one other thing on the reporting form, one other important document, which you can find here at the top of the reporting form. You can either click on user agreement or this link as well. And our user agreement is one other important document to look at before you start submitting with us, because this is basically to understand how we do and don't use your photos. So the main takeaways here are that you retain the copyright to all of your photos, and we won't ever reuse your photos for applications outside of the database without asking for additional permission from you. So for example, if we wanted to share one of your photos on social media, we would ask you about that first, and then of course credit the owner of the photograph in anything that we post. And one other thing to note about the user agreement is that you can leave your watermarks or your copyrights on your images when you submit them, as long as they don't obscure the patterns on the Seadragon's face or body, because obviously we need those for the matching pipeline to work. Okay, so now that the encounter I submitted has processed, I'm going to go to my email where, yep, oh no, that's not, okay. All right. Well, I should eventually, sometimes it takes a minute, but I should eventually receive an automated email with a link that's going to allow me to view the status of my encounter. Once Nerida or I assign and approve the submission, you would also get a second email letting you know whether your dragon is a new individual to the database or has been matched to an existing time series. And if your dragon is recited by another participant, you'll also get an email letting you know about that. So this is how we try to keep you informed about what's happening with your personal submissions. And then from time to time, we'll also share broader stories or updates through social media, but again, only with the photographer's permission. And I think, yep, here we go. So sometimes it just takes a second to come through. So this is what the initial email looks like. And if you click on the link in that email, that is going to always take you to that particular encounter. And at this time, the status of it is unassigned because nobody has approved it yet on the back end. But once we do that, you would be able to check this page to see the status and also just review all of the information that you submitted. So that's a way for you to stay tuned into what's happening with any photos that you share with the database. And I think the last thing I wanted to share with you all is how to contact us, which probably the easiest way to remember that is just to go to our website and go to the homepage and scroll down to the bottom. We have social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. All of those are at SeadragonSearch, so you can message me through any of those. We also have an email address here at the bottom, admin@SeadragonSearch.org, so you can message us there. And please do reach out anytime with questions or concerns or just to say hello, because we love to hear from you guys and to hear your feedback. And along those lines, one last fun thing that I want to point out is that once you've had a go and submitted a few encounters, we want to hear about your experiences with the project and with the platform. So we have a new participant online questionnaire that takes about 10 minutes to complete. And you can find that again under this participate tab, and it's the initial participant survey. If you want to chat even more about Sea Dragons, you can sign up at the end of the questionnaire for a video chat interview with me. And those are really fun. I have been having a great time getting to know our community better and hearing some really awesome feedback and insight about the project. So I hope to get the chance to chat with many more of you in the coming months. So that's where you can find that. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and open it up to discussion time.